distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. We have the third plenary for the day. It's an interesting topic. The topic is Turbulence Ahead, Lessons We Have Learned. And I think we have a very distinguished panel in front of us, drawn from varied experiences. And I think we will have a huge repertoire of ideas emerging out of the wisdom that these people have all gained in the years of public service that they have put in different fields of life. I must mention that we are sitting in a crucible today, a crucible from which a rainbow of ideas should emerge and need to emerge to encapsulate the single-minded determination, I think, to forge ahead on a path which will enrich public life, upgrade societal values and governance values, and ensure that the benefits of economic development are made available to the hitherto not so benefited. And it's indeed a unique opportunity for all of us. And I must compliment the untiring efforts of the team of the India Foundation for bringing together such a wealth of experience under one roof. It must have been a really gigantic task. Now, it is for us assembled here today, we the people, who have been bestowed this wonderful gift of democracy to mold our own destiny, and for us to determine the paths that each one of us would want to contribute in making this country go forward, because out of turbulence emerges a newer paradigm, and I'm certain that for every paradigm that emerges will be far superior to the paradigm that we left behind. And life around the globe has not been static. It's been dynamic in the sense that there has been turbulence of a political, economic, and natural variety. Also, the political includes religious varieties also. We are bound to meet with headwinds of turbulence in future, but I think the resolve should be to emerge stronger, learning from the experiences that we've all had. And I'm sure that with the huge repository of experience and doers that we have, to every challenge that this country will be facing and the world will be facing at large, the response will be greater. For these few words, I call upon each one of our panelists today. To start, we have Mr. Ruud Lubbers, who will be giving his exposition. Mr. Lubbers, come.
Dear friends, I'm glad I am invited here, and then I was hesitating what to talk about. It has to be about ideas. Now, I made a choice. I had to make a choice. And I decided to make the choice for one of the team here, which is energy. Why energy? For two reasons. One is the global reason that next year there will be an important meeting again on climate change. This will be in France, in Paris, the end of the year. But it has started already, the preparations. So I thought maybe it's a good idea here in India to talk a little bit about that dimension. The second reason is that I am a man of energy. I started my life, my political life, my public life, becoming a minister for economic affairs and energy. This was in the year 73. If you calculate with me, you see what time I am now in energy. It's going on. So when I retired out of politics, I became a professor on globalization, and then I became interested, of course, what is happening with the world as a whole. So that brought me back in a different situation. So I start there. That is climate change for the world as a whole. This is part of our challenge, which we call now, these days, our common future, mankind as a whole. Until recently, I thought climate change, of course, is something important for the future. But the last years, I came to the conclusion, this is not something for a future far away. It's already now here. It's not only the question of rising water in the future, floods, etc. But we see recently already more droughts and floods. It's a problem almost today. So this challenge immediately can be seen as a challenge for all peoples all over the world. A few months ago, the United States of America and China partnered and said we have to do something next year on this climate change, and it starts now. So this is a new dimension. A bit strange, because if you say why exactly the United States is of course the most powerful country, the most advanced country, but with China, who sees itself as guiding developing countries, so it's about development at the same time. But I'm here in India, and here in India I notice, we have seen the elections, you've seen coming in Mr. Modi, and he will give a new force to India. So focus on India first. Of course, it's about the economy. And the key question, of course, to reduce corruption and to be credible to the world, and in the first place to its own citizens. So it happens here too. When I think about India, it was for me always a strange country. It was not very rich, it was rich in culture, but in the economy it seemed to be a bit lagging behind. But at the same time, India was known all my life to be good in certain technologies as well. They specialized on that. It brings me to the thought that we talk about climate change, better methods to reduce CO2. Worldwide, we are developing this knowledge. Here in India, technical knowledge was always considered to be very important. I think as part of addressing the climate change, technology is important. Is important. Sometimes people think that when you go for reusement, to reduce, to mitigate climate change, you have to make a choice between economy and growth and addressing climate change. I think this is a misunderstanding. The going for reducing climate change, there is needed knowledge as well. This has to be from all countries, each country, what they can do and which they are good in. But I think India is an example where the people, the citizens, the farmers can be connected with the challenge of climate change. By the way, my opinion is climate change, of course, is a problem of the all populations, we all together, our common future. So my first point is we have to share all that knowledge as if it is free as possible. If you need any agreement on climate change, it is about all knowledge available and to share it all. And only then you can see that there is not a choice between economic growth and mitigation of climate change. If you want to go for economic growth in a sustainable way, they come together. And I do think it's not a dream. I'm absolutely convinced, for example, here, the first decade of Modi is about restoring economic growth, fighting corruption, and realize sustainable growth. This is the combination of what I said just 2 seconds ago. Now, I'm Dutch. I'm not going to bother too much about all the things I did in my life. I said already to you, I'm connected all those years very much with energy. We cannot speak about all those things, although some were mentioned this morning. I said I was in politics a long time, and later I came back to my city of Rotterdam. This is my port city, and there we started the Rotterdam Climate Initiative. It's only one dimension. Rotterdam Climate Initiative is about carbon capture and storage. It's very well known, but it has still to be developed. We're doing that now, these days. It brings me back to the old days, because I said those days I started in an energy research institute in the Netherlands. We focused on uranium, enrichment of uranium. Became a very profitable business, so I'm a bit nuclear too. But we started as well, very early, with solar energy, which became a success. We sold our knowledge first to Germany, and from there on to China. So we're still in that, the solar energy. So I am a man of energy, so I apologize that I'm so enthusiastic speaking about those points. I connect it now, as I made clear, with the climate change. Now maybe I afford this, and I do this also because it might interest you. If you use the word energy these days in Europe, they say, hey, something special is going on. We had in Europe a crisis around the euro. The euro was a result of the maturing of the European Union, that people thought we need one money, our own single currency. It's the euro. Nice idea, but we got some problems by practicing it. So we look now back a number of years to repair the problems of the euro. This was done under the leadership of the chairman of the European Union, Mr. Van Rompuy. We even spoke about Plan Van Rompuy. You have the feeling this is done. And now we are heading to another challenge in Europe. This is the energy union, an energy union. Why an energy union? And what does it mean? Now, of course, the word union is the first. We became convinced that it's really needed that we join forces in the area of energy, basically for 2 reasons, very different ones, but very interesting maybe for you here. First is that we conclude that doing the good, successful job on climate change, we better do it together. We have to be united in that. By the way, Europe was a process after the Second World War to unite it. So we started a system of communities, coal and steel community, not to have any second war starting there, and so it went on. Maybe you are aware that there was an enormous investment in agriculture with the farmers. We came to a common agricultural policy. It seemed to be a bit expensive in the beginning, but later we can say we united the farmers of Europe. And this is key. And so it went on. We created a single market. And with that, Europe became successful. And this is then the next step on energy. This is one important dimension in itself, working together, but with a purpose. And the purpose now is the climate change. There is, however, a second. This is the political one, because our neighbor is Germany, is Russia. Russia is a big neighbor, rich in energy, but it went out of hand because it's not balanced, our relation. And the drama we have seen of that in the Ukraine. It's not only the Ukraine. Ukraine was a former part of the Soviet Union. So there in Moscow have some trouble when they start to become part of the European Union. And we think they have the right for democracy, so why don't they have the chance to be together with the European Union? Now, my personal conviction, and it's very clear, when you look to the scale of the Ukraine, its history and its future, the people there need to have a relationship both with Brussels and Moscow. It's not easy to achieve that. A key factor might be the energy. It's a very practical point. So I think this energy union is very needed to be, for me, as a man of the Netherlands, to be strong when we address Putin. Don't think that you can play each of us out of each other. You deserve a strong, united Europe. So that's the second good reason. Therefore, we need one energy union. And at the very same time, we are prepared, of course. It's our own interest and that of Russia, because of the volume of the energy trade possibilities between the two of us, to say, if we have this united Europe union, the energy union, we can do business with you if you like. We be practical. It's not a question that we want to isolate or to offend you, but you have to be aware that we are now strong and united. So no games anymore. All of us know in Europe that the key point, of course, is that countries themselves, like the Ukraine, organize themselves. And frankly speaking, it became a mess. At the very moment they had a chance to go for the market economy, it became a corrupted market economy. So that is the real question. And therefore, I think what I sketch here, worldwide, and the role of India in the beginning of the climate change, in Europe, we have this energy union with the double ambition to be united and a future. So I could go on for quite a time, but I register my time is over. So thank you very much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear fellow panelists, Mr. Moderator. It's a pleasure for me to be here this morning and share with you some thoughts about the lessons learned of the turbulence we left behind. I was trying to figure out how to summarize lessons learned in just a few minutes given to the speakers. So you will have to forgive me for oversimplifying very complex features and events which are taking place at the global economy and the international society. I will try to put those observations in the framework of integrated human development, the overall topic we are addressing at this conclave. And my intervention will be dedicated to share with you three ideas, three concepts that I think we can draw from the experience of the evolution of the international economy and the international society of the last decades. The first one is that the future is not anymore what it used to be. That the times of change we live in during the last decades, I think we have to realize are becoming a sort of change of time, a real epochal change. There is some issues we can see on the surface. The financial crisis started in 2007, 2008, no doubt, has ended a period, the few decades economists tend to call the Great Moderation, where advanced economies grew at a stable pace in terms of employment, GDP, income levels. And they will face in the future more volatility, less growth, and no doubt higher levels of unemployment. For developing countries, the situation has been the opposite, particularly over the last decade. Developing countries grew at an accelerated pace, contributing almost 2/3 of global growth over the last 5 years. But obviously, this could be observations about an economic cycle. The real change of time appears when you put that in perspective. Last year, for the first time, emerging economies contributed more than 1/2, a little bit over 1/2 of a global GDP in purchase parity power terms. That's the first time in the international economy where the emerging economies takes a lead and implies a major change, considering that the tendency shows a consolidated pattern that will continue contributing the same in the coming years. So although emerging economies will grow at a slower pace, they will still contribute 2/3 of global growth in the years to come. And this is cause and consequence of the second fact I think is signaling an epochal change. This is the emergence of a new global middle class. This is the first time since the 19th century the world is witnessing the emergence of a completely new breed, middle class people the world over. If you take the people spending between $10 and $100 per day in 2010, obviously at purchase parity terms, without considering the exchange rate effects. Then in 2010, in the world, 1.8 billion people were living in that segment. 54% of them were living in Europe and the United States. Now, the same number in 2020 will not be 1.8 billion, will be 3.2 billion. An enormous growth. And 54% of them will be living in Asia, not in Europe, not in the United States, in Asia. That will account for 42% of the expenditure power capacity, the consumption of that global middle class. What does it mean? I think that means more demand of food, more demand of energy, as Mr. Lubes just mentioned, more demand of our from our productive system on our natural resources, more demand for materials and a urbanization drive. So that's why I think we are truly in front, at least, of a new phase of the global economy, and perhaps at the dawn of a true epochal change. Now, this is the first idea I wanted to share with you. The second one is very much related to that. Such situation is present in the international community, both in the political field and in the economic field, with very serious challenges. And those challenges needs to be considered in a broader perspective. I think the most singular feature of this new reality is the need to realize that the global economy, a global society, in order to build cohesive societies, progressive economies, they need to secure the supply of global public goods. That's a very simple concept. At national level, nobody doubts a nation needs public goods to function. Somebody has to provide security, basic education, health campaigns, basic health campaigns. Well, the same needs to be done at the global level for an economy and a society which is increasingly integrating, not only in terms of trade and investment, also in terms of interaction, migration, and politics. Therefore, I think there is a number of global public goods which are extremely relevant and important. And if we want to challenge that thought, we can just look at the effects of the last financial crisis and the millions of jobs and wealth destroyed by the lack of global financial stability, if you would like to consider that a sort of global public good. I would say among in the political field, among economists and politicians, it is easy to understand that the world needs peace and security, and we consider that a global public good. In the economic field, we have the same challenge, and we need at least global public goods in the fields of finance, trade, knowledge sharing, and environment. Now, the third thought I wanted to share with you is related with a lesson learned from previous crises. The current international institutional setting or institutional architecture seems to be unable to deliver properly sufficient amount of these public goods. So I will use my last 2 minutes to argue that we need to introduce innovations. We need to innovate at the institutional level to secure global public goods are properly delivered. What happened at the last financial crisis? We did have in place institutions to deal with financial troubles. The International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, many other institutions. But so far, they were unable to prevent the crisis to occur, and they were later very weak at addressing the major problems of the crisis. We needed a new institutional mechanism to step in to overcome the problems of collective action, and that was the G20. The G20 that started in 2007 and 2008 a different phase of its life. When the G20 was established at the end of the last century, it was set up as a mechanism for information sharing among ministers of finance and presidents of central banks. But between November 2008 and November 2010, the heads of state and government of the G20 met 5 times, and they themselves took decisions to address the financial crisis. It's an average of a meeting every 4 to 5 months. Therefore, my message to the India Ideas Conclave is that we need to realize we are facing an epochal change. This epochal change demands the supply of global public goods in some critical sectors like finance, trade, knowledge sharing, environment, obviously peace and security. And we need institutional innovation to address these demands of supplying proper amounts of global public goods. This is a commanding responsibility of positive players at the international level, of responsible global citizens like India, who has been always playing a positive and constructive role in multilateral affairs. And I think you have to see that responsibility as a contribution not only to the international society, but also as a contribution to your own people. So I would say the efforts the government of India, Indian society has to make to contribute to strengthen the supply of global public goods for the international community are there to improve the working of the international economy, but also to improve the conditions to achieve integrated human development in India itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Carlos Magnaros. Thank you for confirming to the time also. Now may I call upon Dr. Ekmaluddin Sonoglu.
Mr. Chairman, dear co-panelists, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank the Indian Foundation and the organizers of this meeting of kindly inviting me to take part in these important deliberations. When I received the invitation, I thought of the title of this session, Turbulence Ahead what have we learned? And I had in mind certain points to address in my small contribution to this panel. But I have to say that yesterday's afternoon session, the ideas thrown away, discussion, thought-provoking ideas, has guided me, and particularly the keynote speech of His Eminence, Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, about what India can offer to the world, and his very inspiring words that saying, let the divine inspire the intellect, about spirituality and the core values. He spoke about the fight against fanatism. My actual contribution, as I thought to be here, is to speak about fanaticism, radicalism, and extremism as the malaise of our time. And I would like to address this issue in two contexts. A context which is more relevant to this geography, and the one relates to the geography where I come from Turkey. Now, if we speak about the spiritual tradition in this part of the world, in India, we see that it came out of synthesis of traditional hymns, legends, and rituals from cultures along the Indus and Ganges rivers, and plateaus and uplands north and west of the Indian continent. Hinduism was said to approximate an ultimate message of manifold creation, reflecting the long and diversified history of man's quest for the Creator and the reality, at once all embracing and infinite. So if we look to the tradition here in India, we find that it's not like other great traditions in this geography. The Indian tradition transcended foreigners, not by converting them to religion or culture of its own, but by treating their ambitions with supreme equanimity. It is integrated their achievements and their diverse doctrines into the fabric of Indian life without even professing to be specially awed by any of them. So when we speak about such great culture of diversity in harmony, or harmony in diversity, we look to our day's problems, where, say, Buddhism, for instance, which initiated from this country and spread all over the west of the continent. And we look today, Burma, how Buddhism in Burma became a kind of expression of bigotry and radicalism against a certain group of indigenous people in Burma, what they call Rohingyas. And when we look west to the Middle East, we find that Islam, which derives its name from the same salama, the same verb which means making peace or living in peace. Islam means the religion of peace. And the Prophet of Islam, according to the dogmas of the Quran, was sent as a messenger of peace to the whole world. So when the followers of the messenger of peace to the world becomes instruments of killing, cutting throats, of mass killing using chemical weapons, killing child, slaving women and selling women, devastating towns and villages and establishing their own state of tyranny and calling them Islamic State. How and why this happened in Islam, a peaceful religion, in Buddhism, a peaceful religion. Here I come to the second point which we need to address carefully: modernization. We are all for modernizing our societies. We all need to bridge the gap between our societies and advanced societies. Advanced societies not only mean European countries or United States or New Zealand or Australia. It also means Japan, South Korea, and many other examples coming here, Latin America, in Asia. Why then, in these two cases, we can add a third case? It's not only terrorists or extremist radicals in the name of Islam doing what they are doing, or those Buddhist monks in Burma doing whatever they're doing in name of Buddhism. I think we have many other examples, but just to focus on these two examples to be up to the point. I would like to say that here we have a problem of modernization. The societies who are heading to be modernized under certain totalitarian regimes where there is no margin of freedom of thought, freedom of association, or freedom of political activities. Here we have, with the lack of all these basic freedoms, you have a young people who are frustrated. They are born, they come to year 20, 25, and the same head of state is on the top of the state, and they are hearing the same slogans, and they are suffering the same suffering since they were children, and their fathers and parents suffered the same, and they have no way to express their fears, their ambitions, their thinking to work together. Then they are faced or encountered by these radical groups, and they are telling them, come to us, you will have to succeed. If we succeed, you will prevail on this earth. If you do not succeed, you will go to heavens, and then there you will live eternal paradise life. And they are convinced because they have no other ideas to be convinced with. Unfortunately, I never be pro-Marxist or Leninism, but I really feel that when Marxism and Leninism were there, many of these boys would have been Marxists or Leninists. But unfortunately, for lack of ideology, they are all became Islamic or Islamists, and this has nothing to do with Islam. Now then we have to say that why, for instance, the Buddhists in this country, they are not radical as the ones in Myanmar, in Burma. Because they have the original tradition here, which I alluded to in the beginning of my remarks. Secondly, they have a better context of modernization in this country, which is democratic since independence, multi-party system, and free elections, and change of power by elections, by ballot. So in Myanmar, it is a dictator regime, it is a military regime, and this transitional period now from dictator military regime to democratic regime has its sensitivities. Mrs. San Suu Kyi, who is Nobel laureate for peace, did not speak a word on the human rights of Rohingyas. When I visited Burma as the Secretary General of Organization for Islamic Cooperation, OIC, she gave us an appointment at the Parliament to see her. We had an appointment with the President, the Prime Minister, and everybody. last minute she declined because she was afraid of her Buddhist supporters. And the Buddhist monks took to the street shouting against our visit. Well, here, Buddhism is out of its own natural context. And I think the natural context for any good relation between religion and politics would be secularism. If we ensure that secularism is understood and implemented more in Anglo-Saxon doctrine than the French doctrine of laïcité, that would be much better for our countries. Would it be Muslim societies or Hindu societies or Buddhist societies? Because in the French laïcité system, which is the separation of a church and state, which came after the French Revolution, also included or implied the domination of a state on the church. Of course, in Islam, we don't have something called church. I don't know details about Hinduism or Buddhism, but for sure, the clergy here in Buddhism, in Hinduism, etc., might be not as structured, as authoritative as it is in the Catholic Church. So the relation between state and religion in our societies are different than the ones in the French case. So for me, for all my own understanding, the Anglo-Saxon, Anglo-American understanding of secularism, where state does not interfere in religious affairs and give the freedom to religious activities, churches, but of course they are not allowed to meddle in politics, is a better example for our countries. My country was the first secular country or laïc country in the Muslim world, and this took after the proclamation of the Republic, etc., and it was made as a decision of political leadership from top to down, and it has created problems. Now we came to a point that secularism or laïcité does not mean that the state dominates religion, but unfortunately there are some complaints nowadays that the otherwise is taking place, that the state is trying to force its own opinion, etc., etc. It's a big discussion in my country. I don't want to go to that, but what I want to underline here is that we have to find the proper understanding of the relation between this official, political, and state discourse and religious, the political sphere and the religious sphere. If we succeed in creating this, that would be the turbulence ahead of us, which is fanaticism, extremism, and radicalism. We will certainly be more assured to have better future. I have been Secretary General of OIC for 9 years. I happen to be the first Secretary General to elected democratically. And some of my colleagues say you were the first and perhaps you are the last. But anyhow, as the first or as the democratically elected Secretary General, I submitted to the leaders of the OIC, 57 countries, heads of states, a blueprint for the moderation and modernization of the Muslim world, saying that if we want to have a better societies, advanced societies, more peaceful societies, we have to carry on moderation, to realize moderation, and to modernize our societies. Otherwise, we will face the phenomena of radicalism, extremism, and terrorism more and more. I'm glad to say that my blueprint was approved unanimously in 2005. But in practical terms, certain measures has been taken. When you look to the complexity of problems from Boko Haram to Nusra to ISIL to all these radical groups which we know of and we don't know of, you can realize with me that the problem is bigger than we think. And this problem is not only related to the Muslim world or to Burma, because what happened in Burma instigated what happened in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka never had a problem between Muslims and Buddhists, never. But that happened. Maybe not similar reasons, but parallel reasons. And I would like to say that we have, for the future, for the turbulence ahead, what we have learned from our experiences is not enough to deal with the core problem. We have to have new ideas, and I think this forum is more about new ideas. Thank you very much.
Panel colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you very much for having the opportunity to be here and to participate in that very, very important conference set up to give all these aspects to each other. Let me start with a pragmatic remark. As CEO of Bilfinger, which is a company with 70,000 people employing around the world for services, I made in my time the decision that we have a priority to invest in India in the comparison to China. That was not an easy decision because, of course, a lot of shareholders in Western Europe often ask, why are you not in China? When are you in China? Why it is in India? The reason why I did that was that I'm convinced that this country has a lot of potential, not only by the skills of the population, but also by the structure of this country. Yes, it's a federal country. This is a challenge every day, but it is also a chance of a variety of ideas, and this country allows a variety of ideas. And this country is in a democratic structure, and others will have this, let's say, secularization of that people who are well educated and relatively wealthy don't accept that they live in a dictatorship. So there are structural arguments for the future of that country which brought me to that decision. But when you are talking about ideas of India, I think it is also necessary to say time to start here for international companies is still not easy. And to find the transparency of competition, to find a system of justice which is accountable and in short terms and times, able to act, and the question how to organize labor force across the country under very different situations is not easy to succeed. So there are big chances, and I'm totally convinced, and I can prove that, but when we are talking about theoretical issues of the future, we should have in mind that there are also some short steps to be done, and from my feeling and experience in politics and business, relatively easy to be done to catch up to others in the world. That leads me to a more general remark in that panel, which I think is important. I will start with a very positive point my panel colleague Margarinos also mentioned. When we are looking the next years ahead, then we are talking about a significant increase of wealth around the world. And we are talking about conditions that will create this wealth mostly in Asia. And that's a good message for everyone. But this message includes a lot of challenges which justify to say, yes, there are turbulences ahead. First of all, it will be a conflict between regions. For European, knowing that the average growth rate will be between 0.5 to 1.5% a year. And that's the positive description. That means conflicts inside these societies will occur because they have not enough additional wealth to cope with the problems, the world of becoming older, the new social desires we have will be easy solvable. But it is not only that Asia is becoming richer. It is also a question where in Asia will be what kind of development. And there Asia is India as one, let it call a continent for a second. It is China, and it's also the ASEAN countries, three big pillars in the world, which will have competition. So to become more wealthy overall is just a general direction. For individuals, it is not a proper answer. Because the question which individual, where, under which conditions will participate in that is totally open. And there we should add another, I think, very important aspect. When you look back to history, whether India develops faster or less than the United Kingdom was reported maybe 2 or 3 times a year when some ships arrived with new messages. And it was not communicated in whole UK, or it was not communicated in whole India, what was the message the people in that ship had. Today, as we know about Twitter and Facebook accounts this morning, everything from everybody, everywhere in the world is communicated any second. So we have a total comparison of each individual in the world, what is happening with his individual situation compared with the situation of everybody else in the world. Well, I think we all feel looking to our iPads and think we have it may be an advantage to be so well informed. It gives us a chance to get earlier access, not only to information, but also to chances. We can assess risks better than earlier before. But it enables and forces me to compare myself every day with everyone else and to compare success or backlashes to others. And then we go back. To become more wealthy is a competition. It is a competition about access to resources. It is a competition about ability for innovation. It is a competition about good and proper governance. And all these things are on the table of discussion and fail and error any day. And there, a big risk is involved in that. Because as long as we are acting as mankind, as we do since hundreds and thousands of years, we try to defend ourselves in defining the reasons for what we have to defend ourselves. That is the reason why borders all over the world were so important. Because when a government, a society becomes in trouble, the easiest way to stabilize the internal society is to talk about any reasons of where are enemies, dangers, risks around the borders. So you have a common interest in your society to defend you against all these things outside. And in modern societies, we have 2 reasons that can create that danger. Number 1 is nationalism. And to be honest, number 2 is religion. Both can have a high value to coordinate and emulgate a society. And both include a high risk to be the most dangerous point of the next years. And that is, again, it's easy to describe that on a worldwide level or but in country by country. You have to manage these items. 10 minutes is only to talk in a very general way about this issue. But I want to say, I would like to discuss about 2 potential items we have when we think about the question, can we mitigate that? The number one point is self-consciousness of societies. And that's the reason why I was very thankful to listen to Honorable Sri Vishaka yesterday in his opening remarks talking about India. Of course, we all in business today, we can describe options of production, of resources, of agriculture, or whatever, to give you some hints what is the best way to establish a better economy, a better structure in the next months and years. But I'm sure most of that everybody is able in such a conclave to discuss. I think the most important point is, where do you start? You have to start in a point where you are minimizing the danger that you have to use aggressions against others to solidarize your own society. And you will have a need to solidarize because you will have internal tensions in society through such a development. And there is no other alternative than to make people as self-conscious as they can be, that they have a higher tolerance to that tensions in a society which will occur in the time of competition. And number two is openness. I think it is one of the key responsibilities of leaders, whether it's political, economic, or religious leaders, to train people to be open to ideas, situations, behaviors of people outside their own borders. Not in destroying self-confidence, not in destroying own identity, because a society without an own identity, with a clear explanation from where they come and where they want to go, is impossible to govern peacefully. But that does not mean not to tell people what happens outside these borders. That does not mean people to isolate mentality-wise, or to isolate in a way how they try to compete. And I think these both issues, self-confidence and openness, are keywords for the question, how can we manage a process which we wish? We wish for everyone, till the last man or the last woman, to become more wealthy, to become a better social situation. We wish that that will happen in competition, because otherwise we will not have the creativity we need. We want to have that on any place in the world, so we want to have competition about resources. But we also want to have stability inside societies, and we want to have peace in the world. And we have to engineer these instruments on the same level as we're engineering the competitive elements in business and political governance outside. 10 minutes. Thank you very much.
That was an absolutely fascinating array of thoughts that we heard from a huge standpoint, from energy, epochal changes, public goods, fanaticism, and self-consciousness, as Ronald said. Governance today has become a far more critical phenomenon to be left to government alone. The stakeholders in this governance have grown beyond the legislature, beyond the executive, and beyond the judiciary. Stakeholders have become the media, the public, the citizens group, and the man on the street who's wanting to participate in governance, who wants his government to be responsive to his ideas. We have institutions, both political, both economic, and as development comes about, as societal consciousness comes about, as there is competition for resources, as there's competition for desires and needs, there is bound to be a churning in society. There is bound to be a turbulence in society, which may be cross-border, which may be within the country itself. Now, to that extent, we need to ensure that these benefits, if they have to be inclusive, we have to ensure a cleansing of public life. Time has come when we need to participate in nation building. We need to participate to ensure that growth is so broad-based that any kind of turbulence that comes, any kind of churning that comes, maybe natural, maybe religious, maybe political, maybe from outside the geographic boundaries of this great country, we will be in a position to be able to withstand them. We now will throw open the issues for discussion to the House, and we have been given time till 1 o'clock. I guess we can collect half a dozen questions, or maybe 8 or 10 of questions altogether. Yes, please, the lady there.
Sir, what prevents the world leaders from coming together to strongly, firmly and loudly denounce this mindless killings, this perpetual violence that is being put on the humanity? And it has been so inhuman and cruel. Why we are not coming together? If Islam is peace, why the journey of Islam has been so violent?
Well, let me say that, of course, I've been spent all last 10 years shunning and condemning and deploring all these killings and all these massacres, and try to take measures against this, to urge governments to take measures, etc., etc. But of course, what is happening, we have to understand it has nothing to do with Islam. If the killer's name is Ahmed or Muhammad, he doesn't mean that he's representing the Muslim world, that he acts in the religion of Islam. Even in no religion on earth, would it be Abrahamic or non-Abrahamic, stands for peace. All religions stands for peace. And any war in the name of religion, even if religious authorities were behind it, like, say, the Crusades, for instance, this is nothing to do with the tenets of Jesus Christ or the tenets of Christianity, which is a call for mercy. It has other reasons, political reasons. It has maybe social, economic reasons, expansionist mentalities, etc., etc. So it has nothing, any war in the name of religion is not in reality a religious war. What happens in the name of Islam, who gave these boys in Qaeda or in ISIL the right, the qualification to speak on behalf of Islam? Nobody. And I have challenged this as a secretary. Nobody has given them this self-claimed, and we have not to accept this. When you accept what is happening in the very sad, inhumane happenings in Pakistan of slaughtering these innocent boys and girls, it has nothing to do with Islam. The killers are Muslims, the killed boys are Muslims. It has nothing to do with this. Is beyond, this is insane. But we have to understand why this, but what we really have to do is not to accept their claim to Islam. We have to shun that, we have to reject that.
There is no organization of Christian countries, there is no organization of Buddhist countries, much less there is no organization of Hindu countries. What is the great need only for Muslim countries to have such an organization?
Actually, this long history, I have written a book on this. And in 1969, when the first call to meet of the Muslim leaders, India was invited, and India participated. It has a long story, and I will be happy to discuss this with related people whenever time allows, here or elsewhere. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That a lot of the discussions had implicit within it assumptions of the Western sociological circumstances and the Western economic model, which to a large extent we can say has failed, at least does not work in India. And many of the conclusions, therefore, were tainted because of those assumptions, and those assumptions just don't apply here. I want to touch upon a few quick points. One is the comment that was made by one of the speakers that to become wealthy requires competition, and competition leads to aggression as well as creativity at the same time. I do not think competition is a necessity, and an aggressive competition a necessity for creation of wealth, as India has demonstrated with a track record of 5,000 years before the invasions and colonial rule, that we had a sustained economic development model.
Competition will always stay, because anyone who is developing will need resources, and you have two different items or possibilities to distribute or to decide about the distribution of these resources. One is a power of violence, the other is a power of a market system, which is at the end a price. There is no third system, and we should be realistic about that.
Just a simple question addressed to you, Sir Vinodji. You made a point about cleansing public life. The question I had was the consequences, or maybe they're short term, but that of bureaucratic inertia and, as some may call, judicial activism. Your views on that, sir, please.
All that I want to say is only this. Anybody who talks about inertia and not performing, believe me, it's a bogey. It's a total alibi for non-performance. Because anybody who is willing to operate in a transparent fashion, who's willing to be accountable in whatever he does in government or outside government, is the true performer. Anybody who's making any noise about inertia is seeking for an alibi for his non-performance. Thank you.
You spoke about cleansing the public life. Some thoughts on what ordinary citizens can do about that?
Thank you. I think there are a large number of other people in the audience who want to raise some issues, but we are constrained for time.
For me, one talks a lot about religions. Religions is important for me. But I want 1 second for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. When I grew up, we found that an enormous step forward, universal. There's the time that we thought nations deserve to have their own nations, the end of colonialism. Key point. Was a succession of other things. So I want to remind that. Let's be aware that we are growing together to one common future. And when we plan that, and we grow that, and what will give the strength to people? The strength to people is not the endless information about negative things. It's the understanding that peace starts with yourself, in harmony. It starts with the joyful celebration of life itself. And if you say this is nonsense and bullshit, no, it's not. If you go around in all civilizations and with people, that's what they want and that's what they deserve. And we have to promote that culture. And it cannot be done by the leaders. It has to be done by the people themselves. So let's unite in that positive way. This is, from my perspective, the most important thing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rai. Thank you very much for the distinguished panel. Now, just before we break for lunch, I think there's a very pleasant task which I have to perform. I mean, we've heard of startups in the past, and in the earlier session, there was a lot of talk about it. I think here's a case of a resurrection which is being taking place. And there's a group of very, very dedicated people, mainly based in Bangalore and Hyderabad, who brought together and resurrected the magazine Swarajya, which had been founded by Rajaji, C. Rajagopalachari. And this is a very noble, brave, and if I may say, a much needed initiative. And for their inaugural issue, their first hard copy issue, let's put it this way, I think it falls upon me to please ask Shri Ravi Shankar ji to please sort of accept and unveil the first copy.